Greetings, traveller. Come in and take a seat by the fire. Today we will be delving once more into the wider world in which our recent stories have been set, to explore the nature of the setting to a level not possible in our primary narratives. This time around we will be looking at the world itself, the powers that shaped it, and how the echoes of this world's creation still linger, an indelible stain upon reality. This overview is intended to be part of a wider world-building series which runs in parallel to our usual tales, lending context and background to the overarching story. And our tales, as always, are a collaborative effort. So please do comment below with suggestions for things you want to see included in this setting. What nation or tribe would you like to see added to our setting? What elements would you like me to explore further? What themes or ideas do you want to see included? I have included an email address in the description should you wish to take an active part in creating and fleshing out this world. I will do my very best to see your suggestions become part of our expanding narrative. For now, though, let us weave a few tales together. Of Gods and Demons, Part 1. The Creation. Depending on who you ask, the creation of the world known to its current denizens as Cavalon can be attributed to one of three suspects. Should you make your way to the grim stone temples of the Carsian Empire and perch upon the hard wooden pews, you would hear, alongside the regimented rows of the faithful and fearful masses, that nothing existed before the gods, who sculpted and whittled the world, moulding their very dreams into the substance of existence itself. In the towering, gilded sepulchres of Holy Velin, the frothing Velinite lordsmiths damn their fervent congregants with their own truth, that it is not divinity that created the world, but devilry. The world's inherent evil, they posit, is evidence itself of the hand of demons in creation. One need look no further than the roiling lands of dark beyond Velin's cyclopean walls for proof of this assertion. Travel to the bulbous domes and stark pyramids of Karth, and the scholarly folk at its renowned universities will inform you that the prelates and priests of both nations speak in allegory. They will tell you that all evidence points not to the demonic nor to the divine. The celestial fingerprints which cover reality are instead those of ancient and innate beings, often referred to as Fae, with their deep connection to the fabric of life and growth. Other scholars assert that it is not Fae, but creatures far older and more ineffable, who dwell outside the confines of time and logic, who are commonly referred to as the Ancients or Old Ones. The truth, traveller, is far more terrifying and complex. In the beginning, as is so often the case, there was darkness. However, this darkness was far more than a simple absence of light, and far from empty. Before the mundane realms came into being, the great absence that made up reality was filled with the clamour of conflict. On one side, almighty but few, were the great and primordial forces that mortals would come to call the gods. Beings of inestimable power, but finite in number, despite the infinite void in which all things dwelt. On the other side, a roiling mass of clamouring consciousness, individually weak but innumerable, and ever growing. To frame this conflict as one of order against chaos, or light against dark, would be to attempt the application of logic to matters far beyond mortal ken. For light and dark did not yet exist, and there was nothing that might yet be subjected to a mortal's concept of order or chaos. Regardless, in the timeless void, the first reality came to fruition, and it was this: the gods were losing. Slowly but surely, more akin to the erosion of a cliff than the wax and wane of a battlefield, the ever-expanding clamour of the infernal was wearing away the divine. And so, the gods created the physical realm. It was to be a bulwark, a realm that was anathema to every being that yet existed, a realm where even the all-powerful gods would hesitate to set foot. For it was a realm bound and buried by physical law. Gravity, atmospheric pressure, time. The gods created a world too small for themselves, knowing that it would serve, once and always, to separate them from the unending carnage that sought to overwhelm and consume them. But in their magnitude, they were misled. The mortal realms began as a dark and thunderous place, the laws of gods rendering a plain of barren rock and lifeless, molten earth, whose sole purpose was in its inhospitability. But the gods did not account for others. Deep in the darkness, primordial forces stirred, not to join this conflict, but out of purest curiosity. These intangible and eternal forces, forerunners of the Archfey, were drawn to the new realm like moths to a flame, and soon seeded this new pocket of sanity with the first flickers of life. Barren rock fields began to shimmer with the first glimmers of green, and roiling flows of magma cooled as the emptiness above was slowly filled with life-giving air. Clouds formed above the emptiness, and the first rains fell, steaming, to form tiny rivulets in the dust and silt, slowly but surely carving canyons into the bedrock of the gods. They did this not with any master plan in mind, for these early Fae were not creatures of calculation, but of whimsy. They created the first life simply because they could. The infernal multitude watched on, both timeless and impatient in equal measure, as the first scampering creatures began to flit between the newly formed trunks of the primordial forests. And then they found a crack in the wall. The first great conflict of the mortal realms saw carnage hitherto impossible. War waged upon a physical plane proved far more devastating than even the gods could have predicted, for while their contest with the demonic powers had raged through the timeless void, only now could blood be truly shed on either side. The deific creators of the planar palisade realized their folly too late. They had not spared themselves from demonic attacks, but had merely changed the rules of engagement. And as the gods themselves took to battlefields bound by physical law, the toll was immediate and incalculable. The first of the gods fell that day. Eternal consciousness snuffed out in a cage of their own making. Their massive physical bodies, borrowed from the earth, were reclaimed by it, forming the great mountain ranges and in some cases, the very continents themselves. Those few gods to survive this one-sided massacre withdrew, their self-imposed frontier snatched from them easily by the writhing mass which now rampaged and cavorted across the virgin wildernesses as they sought a way to pursue their eternal foes to their final end. It was in these dark days that the first of the beings who would come to be known as Fae learned the value of their now infamous introversion and isolation, slipping back into the dark places of their untouched forests and wild spaces, and establishing themselves as the protectors of these sanctuaries. But what came next was unplanned and unaccounted for, even in the machinations of demonic and divine. For where the blood of immortal and eternal beings mingled in the tortured earth of their reality-twisting conflict, it created something entirely new. From ground torn asunder by apocalyptic war arose the first men. The chapel stands silent, vaulted ceiling lost in the shadows above. Several of the wooden benches filling the room have been overturned, and a robed human priest is lying sprawled before a large altar, blood pooling thickly beneath them. Standing by the door, a pair of orcs look on in contention. One of them, more slender in build but clad in metal plates that have been pulled from a human knight and hammered into a more suitable shape, leans forward and gives the air a furtive sniff. The tang of blood has mingled with a thick smell of incense.
"What is this place?"
The other orc is more solidly built and has a few fresh wounds on their shoulders and arms from the ferocious fighting a few days prior, but they are leaning on their massive axe with a nonchalant air.
"Don't know. Don't care. But it's so fancy. It's garish. Probably a special room for the humans to wash their chief's balls."
The larger orc straightens up, stretching with a deep grunt before stepping into the strange room and striding towards the slab-like altar at the far end.
"Grabic, wait. Relax. The human's already dead."
Grabic knows that their comrades' concerns are more around the nature of the room itself. But the mighty beings which the humans sometimes call to in combat have yet to deign a response, and orcish might has proven sufficient so far. So they ignore the concerns. The altar is mostly sheathed in a heavy white cloth, but on its surface 3 small statues are laid out with evident care. A 4th has been knocked from its place to land amidst the scattered debris of a short but vicious fight. The orc steps over the priest with barely a glance, then stoops to pick up the fallen icon, turning it over in their hands, ignoring the blood that creeps viscously through the creases of its details. It depicts a human, of course. Young, as far as anyone could tell with these odd creatures, thin and lithe, with long flowing locks and a robe-like garment that flows down to its ankles. Each crease and fold of fabric lovingly rendered in cold stone. One of the arms is missing, having snapped off when the statuette fell. Looking along the other 3 figures, the orc cannot help but wonder at their purpose. There is a tall, thin one, with a curly mass of facial hair and a robe that conceals all but 2 thin hands held out in what seems to be a placating gesture. And there, a warrior, clad tip to toe in finely fitted metal that is more a second skin than a separate layer of armour. and there, a stooped and heavily shrouded figure whose face is obscured beneath multiple layers of heavy fabric, one hand pushing out the cloth to indicate a gesture of invitation. Each figure is carved with such incredible attention to detail that Grabic cannot help but admire the craftsmanship of his enemies. The orc spends another few moments admiring these small but ultimately useless trinkets, and then tosses the one they are holding aside. It lands with an audible crack, the head skittering across the stone floor and coming to rest against the foot of the altar as Grabic turns to leave.
Humans are weird.
The first men inherited a world still gripped in the aftermath of the greatest war ever fought. In a world crippled by an eternal conflict between god and demon, the first men represented a new force in reality, a force hitherto unthought of, and born more of serendipity than of design. A force of balance in an unbalanced reality, for good or ill. The first men did not worship nor idolize. They made no deals with demons and paid no homage to gods. They simply were. As this fledgling race stepped forth from the pooled vitality of the timeless denizens of the universe, mingled in the crevices of a broken world, the forces of the infernal were beginning to wane in the face of their unforeseen nemeses, time and physical law. Unaccustomed to the limitations inherent to a physical plane, and unable to overcome the final barriers raised by the gods to seal away their now maligned creation, demonkind withdrew, returning to their timeless and chaotic realm to bide their time and plot the final destruction of their greatest foes, though they did continue to probe and test, as always, eternal and impatient. The gods, for their part, cowered behind their final lines of defense to lick their wounds and count their losses. Their power had proved meagre when brought to bear in the mortal plane, and their losses had left them in very real peril. And so they looked across their creation and took stock. Far from the barren emptiness they had built, the mortal realms bloomed, verdant and fecund, coated in rampant growth and dotted with the scattered settlements of a strange new being that spread across its surface. And a plan began to grow in their minds. They could not fight on the mortal planes, that much was abundantly clear. But perhaps others could. And so, as they gazed down upon these new denizens of this new plane, both the whimsical creations of Fae and the accidental children of their own folly, the gods set about creating something new. The wind whips across the walls, snapping Kaplan's cloak around his ankles as he glares out across the great rift and toward the blackened expanse beyond. People call it the Darklands, but Kaplan has never fully agreed with the name. It is a term used by those who spend their lives in peace and security, huddled in the warm, away from the sight that Kaplan now takes in with a slight frown. The truth is that the Darklands are never truly dark, in the traditional sense at least. Though perpetual storm clouds roil and thunder above, The place is lit in a sickly red-green light at every hour of the day, flickering with unnatural lightning that throws lying shadows across the rocky, barren earth, driving men mad as readily as they are slain by the creatures that stalk amongst the twilit crags. Kaplan's hand drifts unconsciously to the scars that stretch across his jaw. When he closes his eyes, he can still smell the sulfur. Sentinel? Kaplan's hand drops back to his side and he turns, planting a fist against his chest in automatic salute. How goes the watch?
All quiet, Mom.
Mistress Sylvetia does not technically hold a military rank, but the salute is not unexpected. As a high prelate of the Great Bulwark, she warrants this small respect and far more. Her robes of office are so heavy with embroidery and beading that they barely shift in the blustering wind. The king is making his speech. You should go down and join the others. The temple guard will take over your post. When Kaplan does not respond immediately, the high prelate's expression hardens slightly. Are you troubled? Kaplan has been raised as all Velenite protectors are. Truth and honesty are tantamount. Courage and inflexibility too. Yet this relies on the truth being palatable to the Velenite church.
No, Mom.
He lies.
I will go now.
Mistress Sylvetia's expression softens visibly, and she graces him with a faint half nod as he passes her and makes his way down the stone steps toward the waiting mass of soldiers below. He knows this speech, even before it begins. All of them do. It is as familiar to him as a bedside fable is to the children in other less devoted nations. He could recite the key elements in his sleep. What is more, like every one of his comrades, he believes it, wholeheartedly. But that is not really the issue. The soldiers are already arrayed in serried ranks in the large mustering square that sits directly behind one of Velin's mighty gates, and Kaplan has no trouble slipping into place beside the other sentinels near the front, despite no commanding officer dressing the ranks or counting heads. Standing in ordered ranks is as natural to a Velenite as breathing. Order, as the tenets espouse, is the greatest armour against chaos. Before this assembly, hands clasped behind his back, armour practically glowing against the constant flickering of infernal red and yellow, flanked by the imposing watch commanders in their stylized plate, stands his Lord Majesty Silas Kane, true King of Velen, the only man who holds more power than the prelates. At least in theory. Reality is seldom so tidy. Kaplan clamps down on that thought as the king raises his hands in a formal and visible greeting to his troops, and then opens his mouth and begins to speak. My soldiers, my faithful warriors, my friends, our great nation is forged on a simple principle, a founding directive that has been the cornerstone of our very being since our creation. We, the people of our most holy Velen, hold in our hands the fate of every living being in the world. We stand, as we always have, the great bulwark against the dark, the last light. He gestures towards the towering stone walls from which Kaplan just descended. Our walls have remained unbroken for generations. but do not believe what those from other nations claim with such certainty. Mere masonry does not save our world, nor does strength of arms, nor the sharpest blades, nor the thickest of armor. Our greatest weapon against the final enemy is not sword or shield. Lord Kane's gaze falls from the walls to rove across the assembled soldiers, and for a deceptive instant, Kaplan cannot help but feel the king's eyes bore into him before they move on. It is faith. It is unity of purpose. It is loyalty. Not the loyalty of a whipped and chained cur, as some would have you believe. Not the loyalty of a beaten dog, with no choice but to follow its uncaring masters. No, our loyalty is that of the wolf pack. Ours is loyalty that bites and snarls and bares its fangs. Ours is a loyalty to a cause far greater than wealth or authority. He reaches up, lifting the iron crown of vellin from his brow and holding it in front of him with a lack of reverence which would cause a Carsian to blush. Or even kinship. He holds the crown out to his side, where a page takes it from him with considerably more ceremony, before handing him a beautifully crafted great helm, which he tucks beneath his arm. Ours is a loyalty to a higher purpose. The gods put us on this earth for a simple reason. Ours is not to stagnate in debate, or to wallow in purposeless comfort. Ours is not to pursue recognition, or wealth, or power. We do not march forth today to prove ourselves, for we are already proven. Tenfold. We march forth today as the chosen of the gods. We march forth today because this is what we were born to do, because this is our purpose. We march forth now to remind those dark and malignant things of one simple truth. We march for those who cannot. We march for those who will come after. We march now, that the great evil never be allowed to rest. We are the light. We are the warriors of the gods. Some fear the dark, but not we. The king places the thick metal helmet on his head with more care than he paid his crown. We teach the dark to fear. Thank you for listening. More than ever, I would be very grateful for any feedback you have, as I am aware that these lore videos are a little more dense than our usual tales. As I said during the introduction, I do hope you will consider sharing any ideas you have to expand the setting, as I am very keen to incorporate your own creations into our tales where possible. Appropriately credited, of course. I have found the experience of sharing my creations with you all very rewarding, and I would love to play a part in the realizing of your own creativity as well. Comment below or drop an email to the address in the description with any ideas, short stories, drawings, or anything, really, that you want to share. And as always, tell me what you thought, how you felt, and what you want to see next. Until we meet again, traveller, farewell and safe travels.